and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning and good afternoon. Usually we have two screens so that people in the Zendo can see people on Zoom, but we don't have that today, so apologies for that. And sit comfortably if you'd like to for the talk. I want to speak a little bit about silence and stillness today. I think it's probably reasonable to imagine that maybe our birthright is to have stillness and silence. And that maybe pre-industrial times, maybe kind of pre-agricultural times, people had a lot more stillness and a lot more silence. That we've maybe evolved really to have longer periods of time of just sitting about, observing the natural world. Not talking, being with trees and birds and animals, and not talking as much. And maybe even with our moving, the moving had more stillness in the moving. The mind, I think this is fair to maybe assume that maybe the mind was more present and less leaning into the future, or less being held back by the past, burdened by the past, a little more present-minded. So I think it's our birthright to have more stillness and more silence. And in a way, we have to create it for ourselves, particularly in modern society and particularly living in cities. We have to find ways to have a stillness in the body and a stillness in the mind. And we do Zazen. That's what we do in our tradition. We sit, and we often sit together in the mornings as a way to really get the nourishment from being still and being silent. And it feels a little like the sounds that we hear when we're still. Natural sounds seem to be a little healthier for us than industrial sounds. And that's just the way it is, that we have lots of industrial sounds now. But we can still attune ourselves to hearing the natural sounds. Make an intentional effort to attune to the natural sounds of the wind in the trees, of the birds calling. A group of us went hiking yesterday to a waterfall. It's not easy to get to, so hardly anybody ever goes there. And I did notice that even though we chatted quite a bit while we were walking, during the time we're at the waterfall, we kind of all got a little separate from each other and all got quiet. There were 6 of us, and we kind of all got quiet spontaneously and did our own thing around the waterfall and the waterhole for a period of time. I think that's very wonderful. And we all need that. We don't, many people don't get it, which is, I think, very unfortunate. But in our tradition, we get it in our Zazen, and we can carry that stillness, that mental stillness, because stillness isn't necessarily always about physical stillness. Although I think we can hear better when we are physically still. I notice even if I'm in a conversation with someone, and if the conversation turns in a way that it's very important, I notice that I just get still because it's important what's about to be being said. I notice that happens in my body, it gets still. So I can really, really listen well. So when we're still physically, but mentally, particularly mentally, we can hear better and we can see better. We can see more fully. We can hear more fully with less language attached to it. A kind of a pure listening, a pure seeing. And when we see and hear that way, the reason why it's so healthy for us is in that pure seeing and the pure listening, there's less identification with self happening. We're not thinking about ourselves in relation to things, we're just experiencing things. And another thought too about maybe that before industrial times we had more stillness and more time to just reflect and listen, is that people were doing a lot of repetitive tasks. Just, washing clothes by hand or sewing or cooking, like more food preparation, not just chopping of vegetables, but, kneading of dough and fixing gates. And we seem to have a lot less of that too in modern society. So it's a kind of unfortunate thing. When we're still and silent, I think we experience our true selves. We experience true mind. And I thought it would be interesting to read out some of the different words that we use for things like true mind or true self or Buddha nature. And there's a long collection of words that we use, and you hear them in all different texts. So this book is called Kensho, The Art of Zen by Thomas Cleary. And I'm going to read a kind of quite a long list. So just let them flow through you. You don't need to try and remember them or anything like that. Just let them flow through in a way to encourage us to appreciate that there is a kind of a true self beyond the chatter. Buddhism and Zen give different names to true mind. The Bodhisattva precepts of Buddhism call it the mind ground because it produces all virtues. Transcendent wisdom scriptures call it awakening because awareness is its essence. The Flower Ornament Sutra defines it as the universe of realities because it pervades and contains all. The Diamond Scripture calls it that which realizes suchness because it comes from nowhere. Transcendent wisdom scriptures call it nirvana because it is the resort of all sages. The Golden Light Scripture calls it being as is because it is eternally unchanging. The Pure Name Scripture calls it the spiritual body because experience and manifestation depend on it. The treatise on awakening of faith calls it true suchness, because it is unborn and unperishing. The Nirvana scripture calls it Buddha nature, because it is the substance of the three bodies of Buddha. The scripture of complete enlightenment calls it total command, because it emanates virtuous qualities. The scripture of the lion's roar of Queen Shrimala calls it the matrix of realization of suchness, because it conceals and contains. The scripture of perfect doctrine calls it complete awareness, because it breaks through darkness, shining alone. So Zen master Yung Ming's Secret of Mind Alone says, one reality has 1,000 names designated according to conditions. They are all in the scriptures and treatises, too numerous to cite them all. So what about Zen? Zen stops all naming and verbalizing. If even one name is not established, how could there be many names? And yet when responding to feelings and adapting to potentials, there are indeed many names. In Zen, it is sometimes called the self, because it is the basic essence of a living being. Sometimes it is called the true I, because it mirrors all appearances. Sometimes it is called the wondrous mind, because its open awareness shines serenely. Sometimes it is called the host or master, because it has been carrying the burden all along. Sometimes it is called the bottomless bowl, because of living life everywhere one may be. Sometimes it is called the stringless harp, because its melody is beyond the present. Sometimes it is called the inexhaustible lamp, because its illumination breaks through deluded feelings. Sometimes it is called the rootless tree, because the root and stem are firm and strong. Sometimes it is called a razor-sharp sword, because it cuts through senses and objects. Sometimes it is called the land of effortlessness, because the ocean is peaceful and the rivers clear. Sometimes it is called the pearl of the sage, because it rescues the poor and the destitute. Sometimes it is called the keyless lock, because it locks up the six senses. It is also called the clay ox, the wooden horse, the mind source, the mind seal, the mind mirror, the mind moon, the mind pearl. There are too many different names to note them all. If you arrive at the true mind, all names are clear. If you are ignorant of this true mind, all names hang you up. Therefore, you had best be very careful about this true mind. We often use Buddha nature, true self. And when we're still and silent, then we can really experience our true self that's undivided from everything else. We disappear in the totality of everything else. And it's extremely freeing to disappear into the totality of everything else. It awakens a compassion and a care in us, and just a freedom of spirit, less self-concern. So really, this whole talk is just in praise of sitting around and doing nothing. the whole point. Sit around, do nothing. Sometimes when I kind of wonder, is it okay to be sitting around doing zazen like this, doing nothing? I just think of, for thousands of years, very wise people have been saying it is a very good idea to sit around and do nothing. So I go, right, I'm not a fool, or I am a fool. I'd also like to read from Guogu's book, Silent Illumination, because there's a caution around sitting still and being silent. There is more to it than just doing that. We need to have a curious mind. We need to have an open mind and be willing to examine ourselves, because it is possible to sit and be physically still, and a kind of a mental stillness that's a little harsh, where we don't explore our personality and we don't explore habits of mind that may be a little unhelpful and unwholesome. And it is possible to sit that way. So there's cautions always that this sitting needs to be supple, flexible, curious, open, and we do need to look at ourselves. So there's a section in here I'd like to read about this. To be free, we must know what we should be free of. Ordinarily, our minds are cluttered with the thoughts and feelings of everyday living. Sometimes these thoughts are not fully formed concepts, but are simply underlying feeling tones. Most people are unaware of these feeling tones, yet it is precisely these feelings that shape our choices, reasoning, experience, judgment. So we have to learn to recognize them and work with them by cultivating particular attitudes. And I'll just say before continuing reading, some broad kind of feeling tones, just to get a sense of what feeling tones is referring to, is sometimes some of us have a feeling tone that's just sort of restless, just a little bit dissatisfied, kind of a lot of the time, just a little restless. That's a feeling tone. Somebody else might have a feeling tone that's a little kind of depressive, like, oh, it's such an effort. Everything's such an effort. So just a feeling like, oh, heavy. It might not be a loud feeling tone, but it's just a kind of flavor. So that's a feeling tone. Another feeling tone might just be a kind of irritation with things, an annoyance, a little bit of anger, a little bit of judgmentalness, just as a tone, looking a little bit for things to criticize, just a mental habit. The sendo is not as clean as it should be, something like that. Just a little tone. And another tone might be a slight fearfulness, just a little worry, things might go wrong. Just a slight vigilance. It's just a tone. So this section that I'm going to read is encouraging us to observe what are our tones and to see if we can work with them, because they're delusional. These tones are delusional. In practice, we need to develop an awareness of the overall tone of our internal states. By helping us to clear out the clutter in our minds, meditation exposes these hidden internal states so that we can do something about them. Is this clearing itself awakening? No. It is simply practice, and self-grasping may still be present. In the Yogacara or consciousness-only school of Buddhism, the underlying feeling tones are understood as mental factors. At any given moment in waking or sleeping life, there is always a mental factor present. If, for example, the mental factor of restlessness is present in your mind, then no matter how you meditate, you will not be able to settle down. I call these mental factors underlying feeling tones, attitudes or moods we need to work with because they are often obstructive or negative. They can color our experience and prevent us from seeing things as they truly are. On the other hand, if we become aware of these feeling tones and learn to cultivate the right attitude towards them, then we will feel more grounded. Our wandering thoughts will decrease and we will become more focused in meditation and in life. The subtle intentions and concerns of our undercurrents of our interior experience that shape our choices and perceptions. The subtle intentions and concerns are the undercurrents of our interior experience that shape our choices and perceptions. We have to expose them and free ourselves from their shackles. We need to know that nothing defines us or binds us. Once we have exposed negative feeling tones, we can foster correct attitudes that resonate with our original freedom. Original freedom is another example of another word for true self, true mind, original freedom. Many of our subtle tendencies are hidden from our awareness. If we are unaware of what's going on inside us, simply practicing seated meditation won't take us too far along the road to liberation. This is why many practitioners, after years of meditation, wonder why they are still vexed by the same people and events in their lives. How can it be that in seated meditation they're able to gain peace, but in the busyness of life they are basically the same people? If we don't expose the subtle tendencies that govern the way we practice and in turn cultivate correct attitudes, we inevitably perpetuate separateness, opposition, and self-referential thinking. So that's a caution to us to in our zazen to be still but reflective, also reflective. Gugo goes on to give some examples of the kinds of feeling tones that we actually want to cultivate. And he talks about contentment. I think the way that we can cultivate contentment is, first of all, simply to imagine what would it be like to feel content? What would it feel like to be content pretty much all the time? And just imagine that. Often I think that's all we need to do. We need to just picture contentment, and then we will naturally start to let ourselves feel contentment. And we can even be content in difficulty. We can be content with navigating a difficult situation. We can be like, okay, I've got this difficult situation. I'm going to navigate it. I'm going to do what needs to be done with this difficult situation. So we can be content in difficulty. Really, you could say contentment is just not emphasizing aversion and attachment, the cause of the basic causes of suffering. Another feeling tone we can cultivate is interest in things. Just an open receptivity to anything and everything that's around us, an interest, open-hearted, open-minded interest in things. And we can cultivate confidence in ourselves, confidence in the Dharma, confidence in each other, confidence in the world. It's kind of another way of saying a kind of faith or trust. We can cultivate that confidence in the Dharma. And then the confidence in ourselves is not a confidence in our particular separate self, but just confidence in ourselves as a conscious being, just as an aware being. We can develop confidence in that. I think there's room too to be confident and celebratory of what our strengths happen to be, and to share the strengths that we happen to have. I mean, one of the precepts that we take is not to be stingy, and that not be stingy with the Dharma is one of the ways it's written. And that includes sharing our positive qualities, sharing our strengths. If we're intelligent, use it. If we're physically capable, use your body well. If you're creative, be creative. Have good communication skills, communicate. That kind of quality of confidence. And when we do that, we naturally also want to help others to do that. We feel the fruits of that, the benefit of being that way, and want to draw that out in others. And then another feeling tone is sort of a determination, an energetic determination, a focus. I want to wake up. Because really you could say the main kind of purpose, I don't know if that would be the right word, but one of the main kind of aspirations of Zen practice is to wake up to the nature of reality, to wake up and understand what delusion is, and to be able to drop delusion. So we can develop a determination to want to experience that and embody that and be that for the benefit of all beings. So I'm going to finish just with a koan that many of us have heard before. Case 87 from the Blue Cliff Record. Yun Men, teaching his community, said, medicine and disease subdue each other. The whole world is medicine. What is the self? The whole world is medicine is just such a beautiful line that we can carry around and contemplate. The whole world is medicine. And who am I in this world that is medicine? All the world is good medicine. Any difficulty is good medicine. Any praise is good medicine. Anything ordinary, anything difficult, anything boring, anything beautiful, it's all good medicine. If we turn our minds that way, if we relate to it that way, if we fully respond to it wholeheartedly, then it all becomes good medicine. It all becomes medicine. Disease and medicine subdue each other. They go together. So being still, physically and mentally, we can be mentally still while we're active. We can be doing a task and be mentally still. So this stillness and activity kind of have this sort of non-dual quality about them. They're not in comparison to anything. We can be still while we're moving. We can be active while we're still. We can be sitting still in Zazen and our mind is actively engaged with the Dharma. We can be running and be completely still with the natural environment. So I hope this is just a little encouragement to continue with regular Zazen, basically. All right. I'm going to stop recording. There we go. Kai's given a little heart symbol. Would anyone like to comment or ask a question? Jacob.
Can you talk a bit more about this idea about curiosity in Zazen? So I'm trying to understand, like, when you feel these kind of feeling tones, to what extent should you explore those versus let them go?
Yeah, yes, good question about to what extent to explore or just be still and pay attention to the breath, for example. Yeah. Well, I have great faith in our own wisdom to navigate those sorts of questions. So if I'm in Zazen and I've noticed you've got your hand up, Scott, so I will not notice. When we're sitting in Zazen, I find if say something has happened and I'm just aware that there's a little part of me, a feeling tone that doesn't feel completely wholesome has just kind of come up a bit. I might just let that whole period of Zazen be about that. I'll just be going, feeling a little defensive. That's interesting. You know, I might play out scenarios. How might I navigate this better? What could I say later on today? Or what might I do differently? Or how am I thinking about this that I'm creating? I like to take full responsibility that if I have any mental disturbance, that it's totally me to do something about it. You know, like it's much more powerful to take full blame than it is to say, well, if they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be feeling this way. That kind of doesn't take us anywhere. So I just like to take full responsibility and then just be really curious with myself. Just curious with myself. And I've tended to find that solutions just arise. Yeah, they just arise. So I think we can, especially if we have a regular Zazen practice, we can really trust ourselves. Sometimes we just kind of focus on the breath or on sounds. And other times we're going to be doing self-exploration and noticing, I do have this habit of wanting people to like me or whatever it might be. Start to notice that habit. I think it's a perfectly beneficial thing in Zazen to spend time with that. Like that becomes the focus instead of the breath. It's this feeling tone. Yeah. You're welcome. Scott, you have to unmute.
I just want to, first of all, thank you very much for teaching. You know, I don't think I've ever run across the teaching on feeling tones before. But as soon as you started talking about it, it was like a light went on. It was like, oh yeah, of course that's such a thing, is that, you know, and I can see how that's a really important insight to have about oneself and others. So, in fact, about what talked about later as well. But I just want to thank you very much for your very fine Dharma talk.
Thank you, Scott. And maybe I could share that I think a really pivotal turning point in my own practice was about 14 years ago, when I really noticed that I had a feeling tone of just being a little scared of the world. It was just this feeling tone, a little scared of the world. I need certain people to kind of act as a buffer between me and the world. And I'd kind of known this about myself, but I really got in touch with that and decided I want to take full responsibility for the way I relate to the world. And just steadily, if I can, let go of this idea that the world is just a little dangerous. I really mark that as a very important, I would even describe it as like a real maturation. That in a way, you could say that feeling tone, most of our feeling tones do come from our childhood. So when we can actually dissolve a feeling tone, we grow up. We grow up. And we want to grow up. We're more beneficial to other people when we're really mature. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, Chini?
I have a question. I remember when you were reading from one of the books, there was a line that was saying that the true self is a keyless lock and it locks up the
six senses. Yeah.
I didn't understand that at all.
Yes.
Like, why does it lock them up? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you explain?
Yes. I noticed that too.
Okay.
And the way, I mean, I haven't read anything more about that, but the way I understood that, is because lock up the six senses sounds very harsh, doesn't it? Kind of like, but the way I took that is that we are not, it's like locks them up as in they don't dominate, they don't kind of rule our life in that negative sense of our thoughts saying, people don't like me, and then that becomes a dominant thought in your head, or, you know, seeing something, we don't like the sound of the traffic, like, why is there so much traffic, you know, and that's controlling us. So I think that a lockless key, keyless lock, was it?
Keyless lock.
A keyless lock
I think.
that locks up the senses. That's how I took it to mean. And whenever we come across translations like that, because often I think it's the translation that makes it more confusing, but maybe it would have been confusing in the Chinese as well, or if it's the Sanskrit, or, you know, I really try to work to how can I make sense of this in a way that feels really wholesome and doesn't sound like harsh. How can I find a way? So that's kind of part of what our practice is to put our own work in to unpack language like that. And we can ask other people too, of course, just like you just did, yeah. Because we don't want to lock up the senses in that we've just been talking about how beautiful it is to just have pure listening and pure seeing. But I think that's what I took it to mean. We don't want them to, we don't want our senses to be the rulers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because we don't want there to be any rulers. Yeah. All right, I think we'll finish there. So we finish with our closing chant, and then we're all going to get up and bow, and people can bow to online. Right, okay, yes. And it's written down there on the card if you'd like to join in. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable. I vow to become it. I'm just going to spin the laptop around. You might want me to step back a bit, John. Okay. So no, you don't see, yeah, you just need to pick up the ball.
Okay, pick it up.
Yep. We'll stand facing in. Just file out. Do you want to pick up the laptop?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Jack. Hi, Kai.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful talk, Neti. Thanks.
You're welcome. And this is John. This is his first
Hey.
time joining us today. And
Hi,
I think
John.
Jason before.
Jacob.
Oh, Jacob, sorry.
It's okay. All the J names.
Yeah.
Jacob, yes.
All right, we'll
And
have
Chinny hiding this. Oh, she's behind the computer. She's holding the
holding
computer.
it. All right. Have a good
Right,
day.
guys. Yeah,
Have a
you
good
too.
evening.
Bye.
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 There you go. We can just, I guess we'll just end. And we can just close it.